I don't think that Danny Gatton was better than Brian Setzer. You can see I'm really scared here. I'm really concerned. Working up a sweat trying to keep up with a bit of Danny Gatton. Was somewhere along those lines, but Danny Gatton is certainly an enigmatic player. One of the best of all time, I think. One of the best guitar players of all time. Absolutely love Danny Gatton. Today's video is going to be talking about how I believe he was the evolution of rockabilly guitar. I still think he's taken it further than anyone really has, to some degree. So we'll get into that. Now, let me know if you would like me to transcribe that solo, or at least how I play it. It's pretty close, but there are some parts in there that I'm sort of not 100% what's going on. There's a little bit of noise there. The delay can make it really tricky. So I kind of did something close. I hope it did it justice. Pretty hard to do with Danny Gatton, but I can certainly transcribe what I'm hearing and teach that if people are interested. Now, I'll take this opportunity to thank my latest patrons. I've been a little slack with this, but thank you Mark V, Reg Terrell, Dusty Nuts for Sale, Ben Bifton, Olivers, Michael Miranda, Maximilian Merman, and Mike Haran. If I have missed you, feel free to send me a message. It only shows me like a couple of the last few unless I log on the computer, which I will do, but at least for today, do let me know if you've missed out. I'm happy to give everybody a mention. It's just been very crazy because I also have some awesome news. I am currently working on a project with Krista Rosario, who plays double bass for Brian Setzer. Now, one of the reasons I was inspired to do this video on Danny Gatton was he sent me a couple of tracks. I guess when we were sort of, what sort of stuff do you want to do? We're back and forthing with a few things, and Danny Gatton came up, and I love Danny Gatton. So another thing I'll mention is it's really worth grabbing this DVD. I bought this when I was, I don't know, maybe 17 or 18, and I spent a lot of time going through it. It really impacted my playing. It's a really great DVD. The second one on rhythm playing is great too, but really, if you want all the ripping lead stuff, that's where it's at. So check that out. Let's get into the video. So the areas I want to talk about today: Danny Gatton's incredible tone, technical prowess, and ingenuity. Okay, so what do I love about Danny Gatton's tone? What he did with delay. Okay, he really ramped it up. Now, you would have thought that exaggerating a slapback tone is going to end in a mushy mess, but he was such a neat player, or certainly it's hard to explain, but the way he ripped into the guitar, it really complemented his playing, and his lines actually came out really quite great. I think he really had it dialed in. I don't know if he had a tap tempo set up. I don't know what sort of delay he was using. I haven't researched that, but I talk about this in one of my videos where I talk about setting your slap back to the pace of the song. So in this case, if we're going one, and it's like on the and between the 1 and the 2. I've got a whole tutorial about this, but essentially it's like it's keeping the beat in between the beats. It's like keeping time in between the beats. So now we have this really even kind of movement. I think he may have also run a longer delay on top or something. There was something else going on. I haven't really been able to decode that, but at least with that really even slap, you can hear if you've got a really nice, even technique, not saying I do, but if you're as even as you can be with your picking technique, it actually works really well. It's got a beautiful double-tracked sound. And Danny Gatton was just so good at that, at nailing that tone. And it made it sound like there was more happening, to be honest. It made his licks a little scarier than they are, I'll be honest. If you really work on them and you've got transcriptions, or you start breaking them down, they're not so scary. I mean, I guess I'm comparing it to, say, Brian Setzer or something like that, which seems a little more achievable, but when you look at it, it's the way he uses slapback definitely creates some more effect. So I think he's done that really well, and it's really, really cool. The other thing I wanted to say, which will fall into technique as well, his left hand technique well, both hands really, really contribute to his tone. He's got a great ripping legato technique that can make his playing sound so full, even though he's not picking a ton of notes. But then if he wants to pick really aggressively and fast, he's got an incredible right hand. And look, just as a bit of advice, if you want to get into that stuff, it's all about practicing with a metronome. With the right hand, and then the legato stuff the same, making sure it's nice and neat. You know, I'm not I could be better at that, frankly, but you get the idea. You slow things down, you get them sounding as good as they can slow, and then you build them up. And I can almost guarantee there was a lot of wood shedding for Danny Gatton. You can see it in his playing, and you can hear it in his sound. That takes me to the next element of his playing, and that's his technical prowess. He's technically, he's technically brilliant, and I guess pretty much the things I was talking about is all I'm going to talk about now, but I guess from a slightly different perspective, because that stuff really contributes to a great tone. Having good technique, having good ability in both hands, really contributes to a good tone. But talking about his technique, again, he could absolutely rip flat out, picking every note, or he could play beautiful legato lines where everything was really strong sounding. He also had a lot of variety in that he could play great hybrid picking stuff. He was a monster hybrid picker, so he could do all the... he could do all that stuff really well, even hybrid picking. He just did it so well. He could do the Chet stuff. He was obviously a Chet fan, you could really tell, because he had a really solid, boom cheek too. Which would essentially get a little bit lost, I think, in the faster stuff. You lose a little bit of the boom chick, and it's just a really fast boom chick. But it's there. So that's really worth mentioning too. He had that variety. And again, it's going to lean very quickly into the next part of the discussion. But he used a lot of techniques that Chet Atkins would use. He used a lot of techniques that a lot of the early guys used, Cliff Gallup and all of that stuff. But he just took it all to another level. He sort of developed it. He took some of the really awesome repetitive licks that he used. He would build on Chet Atkins style repetitive licks, but he'd made them his own. And he had some really brilliant ideas that just sounded incredible. And again, this is starting to lean now into ingenuity. Ingenuity is ingeniousness. I'm starting to question that word. That happens when you're making videos because you realize, there's an audience. Anyway. So, moving into the discussion, talking about essentially what a genius he was, he had some really cool things going on in his playing that he had, as I mentioned, sort of evolved from previous players. His playing, like Cliff Gallup's, was really jazz-informed. He had bebop lines. You'd see him... really jazzy type lines, and his chord progressions and his ideas too started to move outside of the blues as well. I mean, some of his licks where you see him going, an F sus chord off the back of an A chord. You're going, well, that's not straight up rockabilly. So he was really moving the genre around and moving it forward and doing some different things. I mentioned his repeated licks. Those... he did that stuff really well. He does some that sort of go off into other territories, and I haven't even really learnt them. But there was, and again, the double stop thing. He used double stops on another level as well. So he'd be doing repeated licks with double stops, but again, they'd be a little more aggressive, and there'd be more happening than what you might have seen originally in the early 50s rockabilly. But you can tell he was super informed. He'd obviously spent thousands of hours playing off of those records, but he came up with ideas of his own, just like that last one. And I mean, that one I feel like is fairly Chet Atkins, but Chet would have done that with his fingers, where actually, surprisingly, Danny, on the... there's a live clip where they play for about half an hour. It's one of the best things on YouTube. That's where I got that solo from. I'll put a link to it below. But I was quite surprised to see he was doing those licks just with a pick and just strumming it with a really cool rhythm and making it work, where Chet would have done that with his fingers. So it's a slightly different dynamic, but again, he's made it his own. And then another thing that he did sort of, in a motific way, or when he was, I guess, writing heads for blues ideas that they would then jam over, there's a tune so cool. And I mean that riff right there. Man, when I first tried to learn that, I was like, ooh, because you generally rockabilly to keep it moving in triplets like that. Brilliant. You wouldn't have really seen it so much in anything else. It was like, it's very Danny Gatton to play around with rhythms like that and go, hey, I'm going to keep that triplet pattern. Triplets, for example, like that whole thing is in that triplet rhythm. I love that, and it's just one little example of the sort of things that Danny Gatton was doing to push the genre. Think of really creative things that weren't being done over and over again. He didn't just do sort of catch cry classic rockabilly licks. He took them, played with them, expanded on them, and that's just more proof and more reason, I think, that he was the guy that was really helping rockabilly evolve. Now, the obvious discussion here is, I know I can hear people saying, well, what about Setzer? But, look, Setzer's amazing. I love Brian Setzer. We all love Brian Setzer. But he and Danny Gatton were a little bit different. I think Brian Setzer, he influenced a lot more people. His communication, his tasteful ideas, they're off the planet. You can never discount Brian Setzer in any way, shape, or form because of the influence that he's had and just how he connects with people through his playing. But I do feel that Danny Gatton, was, as a pure guitar player, people are going to start throwing things at me for this, but I think he was, technically had a bit more going on. His stuff was a little bit more complex, and he may have been, I'm scared to say it, but he may have been technically a slightly more capable player. I'm not saying he was a better player, because that's not what makes a better player. If we want to get into this, you could say that Yngwie Malmsteen is a technically better player than Danny Gatton will ever have been. So it's really not the be all and end all. But I think if we're going to put it pound for pound as a pure guitar thing, I'll just put it this way: Danny Gatton stuff's a little harder. It's harder for me to play. I find it harder to play than Brian Setzer stuff. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't think that Danny Gatton was better than Brian Setzer. You can see I'm really scared here. I'm really concerned. But I just love both of them. I just think they're both incredible. But there's definitely things you're going to get working on Danny Gatton stuff that you won't get from Brian Setzer, and vice versa. So that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. Do go check out, is it ACL Live? I don't know what ACL is. That sounds like a joint in your knee. But I think it's ACL Live. They do. This is like a Danny Gatton special. Goes for about half an hour. Go watch it. It will blow your mind. He was so great. Such a tragic loss to the guitar world. It was a long time ago, but I still, I still feel it, because when you watch his stuff, you go, wow, where was this guy going? And I didn't say as well, in terms of his jazz stuff, you listen to the Redneck Jazz Explosion. Is it Redneck Jazz Explosion? Stuff. Look up Redneck Jazz Explosion, and you'll find the album where it was bop. It was bebop. That guy could really play that stuff as well. Western swing, you name it, man. The guy could do it all. So such a shame we didn't get to see him live on, but at least his music lives on, and hopefully you're being reached by it today, and you'll go have another listen. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll play you out with a bit more of My Baby Left Me.